Hey guys, welcome back. How's it going? It hasn't been that long since I've seen you last. But welcome back. Nonetheless, today we're going to be looking at some of the books on my bookshelf. I've always been a fan of reading, and I hope you are too. If not, it's definitely a hobby I would recommend getting into because there's a lot you can learn from them, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. It's a good pastime. It really gets the juices flowing, and it's just an all-around fun experience once kind of get over that hump. If you either are a fan of reading and you're kind of going through a lull where you're not reading as much, or you're a new reader and you have a hard time sticking to the page, all becomes easier the more you do it. So yeah, I definitely really feel like people don't take reading as seriously as they should, because it teaches you about the world and yourself, and those are all very important things if you want to grow and change as a person. And I guess we'll just get right into it. I'll start looking at some of these books I have. This is a really interesting book about Charles Manson and the defense attorney who put him away. He was definitely he was the top dog on the case of Charles Manson, and putting him behind bars and even trying to get the death penalty put on Manson, which happened, but he just never got executed, which is very, very strange and odd, but whatever. There's a lot of details in this book that I didn't really know about just hearing Charles Manson. I feel like there's a lot of whimsical, whimsiness behind these stories and kind of tall tales that people say about the Manson family and what they did. When you read the book, you actually realize that a lot of the things you have heard are true, and they were really a crazy bunch of people. I mean, truly, and pure evil, man. I don't know how else to say it, but it was just really disturbing reading all of the evidence and what happened in those cases, what Charles Manson did to his followers, and what he got them to do to, I believe, two families. Like the big cases were a husband and wife that were murdered in their home, and then the next night, maybe even the same night, I think it was the next night, they killed Sharon Tate and the rest of the people at the little small gathering she had going on at her house. And man, it was really just disturbing to read what someone or what people are capable of. It was interesting, and I'd highly recommend this if you're a fan of Charles Manson, of cults. It really does kind of shine a light on that time in history. I also would like to read a book that I heard came out that kind of disputes what was written by Vincent Bugliosi. I don't know how to say it, but it's kind of actually really a little strange. It's a bit of a conspiracy theory, although the journalist who wrote it, I guess, has a lot of evidence to back it up. There was a lot of government cover-up in the case of Charles Manson and his family, because apparently they were part of the MK Ultra experiment, which, if none of you know about that, it was a legitimate study that the government had going on behind public eyes, that they used psychedelics to try and figure out what it would do to people. And I would kind of say, I don't want to say mind control, but they definitely wanted to see if people could be manipulated on psychedelics. And they do believe that Charles Manson was actually working for the government and was part of those experiments and studies that the government was doing without the American people knowing. Until recently, there were kind of always talks about the MK Ultra studies. They haven't really been proven until recently, like with legitimate documentation. Interesting stuff indeed. Recommend this book. It's not bad. This stack right here is a lot of the books I have on philosophy and psychology, things of that nature. And one of them worth mentioning is Being in Time by Martin Heidegger. I still haven't finished it, but it is a intense read for sure, and it most definitely makes you look at the world differently and yourself. There's a lot going on. I'll be honest, it's kind of hard to take in, but I would recommend it. It's good to read some philosophy and gain a new perspective on the world. It's always a good thing. There's this other book by the Dalai Lama, which was really good, The Art of Happiness, and it was interesting to read like how to be happy in terms of Buddhism, because Buddhism is always something that's interested me. I think there's a lot of things you can gain from their way of life and how they do things, how they think and operate. They definitely give a good perspective on the world. So that's something I would check out and just read up on some Buddhist ideology and stories when you get the chance. It's worth looking into. And then we got 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. I'm a big fan of Jordan Peterson. I think he does a lot of good work in helping people and helping them specifically through mental health issues, because he is a psychologist, and that's kind of where his main focus is in this book. He takes a lot of ideas from religion, mainly the Catholic religion. He talks a lot about psychology, what we can learn from that, and also brings up philosophy. And literally, just like 12 Rules for Life, there's different rules within the book, and he uses what I mentioned earlier, religion, philosophy, and psychology to kind of, I guess you could say, back up his rule, or just back up like why you should live a certain way, or why you should do something this, again, a certain way, as opposed to something else that isn't really beneficial to your well-being. It was a good read. I feel like, unfortunately, like the self-help book industry is kind of like fucked up, and they do take advantage of people, but I still think there are really well thought out self-help books that shouldn't get a bad rap just because of the other books that have been written. There's a lot of things to gain. Again, this is why I love reading. Like, you always want a new perspective on life. You always want to be growing, and you always want to be changing, because that's important to grow as a human. That's what you want. It's what you want for the world. I think people have a hard time realizing that if they want that for the world, but they don't realize that they themselves also have to change with that world in order for it to do that. And I think reading really helps you put all that together and kind of figure out how to actually make that change happen. You know, it's important. There's a few others in here. This I really enjoyed this. This is an autobiography by Hunter S. Thompson's son. If any of you don't know who Hunter S. Thompson is, he is a very famous and renowned journalist. If any of you have seen the movie with Johnny Depp, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, that was based on a book that was kind of, it was fiction, but it was kind of based on a real life story of Hunter S. Thompson. He just kind of wrote it from an outside perspective. He also spent some time with the Hells Angels back in the 60s, like in their heyday, when they were really going buck wild and just doing ridiculous and illegal shit. And he wrote a book called The Hells Angels, and I still need to read that. I'd really love to, because a lot of his political takes or like essays written on politics are very important to me, and I would recommend reading them just because I like his style of writing. He's an interesting guy. He's not for everybody, but I think he is definitely a valuable person in the in the journalism community, because I think, is what journalism represents. He was always pretty objective, and if he wasn't being objective, you knew he wasn't taking his opinion and saying like, hey guys, this is how you have to live, this is how you have to do things. That wasn't the case. He was always pretty objective, like I said, and if he wasn't, you knew, which was great. And it was nice to read about Hunter S. Thompson through the eyes of his son. It was cool, and I'd recommend that as well. We got a classic, Where the Wild Things Are. It doesn't matter that it's a children's book. It's still good, and the artwork is great. The Walking Dead series, the comic books are really good. The artwork's awesome. The show was good for a while, but it's definitely fallen off. I would say the same for the comic books, but they're really interesting and kind of remind me a bit of the Lord of the Flies. People always want to know like what would happen if the world devolved and we lost all of the luxuries that humans have today. And it's kind of interesting to see like how we would operate if there was ever an apocalypse, or there were no rules and laws, a government structure to kind of keep us in check. It's interesting. Watchmen, I would really I highly recommend Watchmen. Same with V for Vendetta. The Boys kind of reminds me of The Watchmen, if any of you have seen that. It's more of a realistic take on superheroes, what we would actually do if we had superpowers. And most people, or like the cookie cutter movies and comic books we read on the regular, superheroes are always doing the good thing. They're the ones fighting for the world, taking part in making it a better place. But realistically, if humans had power, we've already seen what humans with power do, and they kind of abuse it. They go on a power trip, and you see that happening in Watchmen, and it's nice and kind of refreshing to read a superhero book or graphic novel that is more in line to what would actually happen. It's cool. I got a few mangas in here. I'd really love to get into more manga. Actually, if you guys have any that you would recommend, leave a comment in the comment section below, because I would really like to get into some more of it. I've read One Piece and Death Note. Death Note is really cool. I would say it's more adultish and has larger themes that you actually kind of have to think about, whereas One Piece to me is just like a fun, relaxing adventure, I guess. But yeah, leave a comment, because I would love to get into some more manga. This is Thunder Mountain by Zane Grey. It was the first Western I ever read, and surprisingly, I just recently read this like 1 to 2 years ago, and I'm kind of ashamed of myself that I've never read a Western before, because this was fantastic. I'm really glad I picked this one out. It's about 3 brothers who, back in the day when everyone was mining for gold and following along the Oregon Trail to better prospects, these 3 brothers hit just an absolute gold mine, and they find a hot spot where they can pan and everything like that, and they assume that people are going to find out about this quickly, and they try to figure out a way to make sure that they get their profits, and that it kind of stays to themselves. They don't want anyone to know about this gold mine that they just found. But unfortunately, like that's not what happens. Large community just like sets up on this gold mine, and it kind of makes it like a town. They end up setting up a bar, shops, things like that. And one of the brothers died, and there's a lot of like treachery involved, like bribery, I guess you could say, betrayal, love. I'm glad I read it. I would highly recommend it. Brave New World. I feel like a lot of people aren't going to like my opinion of this, but I thought it was pretty garbage. So many friends have, and like teachers have recommended this book to me for the longest time, and I just never got around to reading it, and I finally did, and it was torture. I forced myself to read it. I didn't like the author Aldous Huxley's style of writing. If I'm being honest, it just felt like a first draft to me. It didn't feel like it was polished or finished, and that might have been what he was going for, but I just didn't think it held up to all of the reviews and praise I had heard about this book, and I was just disappointed when I finally got around to reading it. I think that the themes involved are important, and he brings up a lot of interesting ideas of what the future could look like, and I did appreciate that for sure. I really did overall. I liked the themes of the story. I just didn't like the story itself, the writing style. I much prefer 1984 to this. It's what often gets compared to Brave New World, and I just think if you're going to compare the two, 1984 is far superior, just no question. I do recommend reading both of these. They are very valuable and just give you a lot to think about. So down here, we got The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, which are just fantastic. Really, 10 out of 10. Fucking great books. I think they are were so popular when they came out and so popular today because most pieces of art last the most amount of time when they really encapsulate what it means to be human. It's hard to explain, but they just encompass these really large themes that we face throughout our life, whether it's love, hate, revenge, betrayal, good and evil. These books just really do a great job of stripping them of everything, I guess, and just getting down to the bare necessities of what those things are. And I think it's important to sometimes look at life like that, because it's a good way to, I guess, find your morals and values. And just all around, like, this is definitely one of, like, I think personally, like, in the top 10 of like all the books I've ever read. Yeah, I'd say top 10. I would highly recommend them. The movies are pretty good, especially The Lord of the Rings. I'll be straight though, The Hobbit, they dropped the ball on that one. Those were absolute garbage. I would not even spend time watching them. But the book was great, and I thought it was a nice precursor to The Lord of the Rings. I actually read The Hobbit first and then got into The Lord of the Rings, and I think it prepares you a bit, because The Hobbit is very much reads almost like a children's story, and The Lord of the Rings is very intense and dark and way more raw than The Hobbit is. Not to say that The Hobbit is childish or easy to read, anything like that. It still holds up to The Lord of the Rings, if that makes sense. Thank you for watching, guys. I had a fun time talking about some of the books that I enjoy and that I would recommend to you guys. I'd definitely like to make more videos like this in the future. And if you do too, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you want to see more of my content, and check out the link in my description below for all of my social media, my Patreon, and my podcast on Spotify. Thanks for tuning in, and peace out. Until next time, guys.